It all started as a simple ear infection. There was a brief debate in my head if I should go see a doctor since it wasn't getting any better. My equilibrium was thrown off due to the infection. I couldn't even lay my head back without everything spinning out of control. My lack of insurance forced me to visit an urgent care facility in a not so desirable part of the city. It was basically in a strip mall next to a liquor store a few spaces down. I thought for sure I was at the wrong place, but sure enough, despite the only indication being an address stenciled on the door, it was an urgent care center. The waiting room was a small box that smelled like a damp, mildewed basement. 2 long fluorescent tubes embedded in the ceiling provided light. One of them was performing at 70% power. The other was having death flickers. 5 chairs were lined up against the dirty wall opposite a single check-in window. There was no one sitting on the other side, just a clipboard with a sign-in sheet attached on the small shelf. I saw that only 2 other patients had been here all day. I jotted down my name and time of arrival, then grabbed a seat. I took a quick glance around the room, leaning forward, careful not to add to the musty head grease stains behind me. On the wall was an abstract painting of red and white geometric shapes, most likely created and hung sometime in the 70s maybe. Directly above that was a surveillance camera. The red blinking light told me it was working. Next to the check-in window was the door leading into the facility. It wasn't but 10 minutes before the door opened and the doctor came out. The guy looked untouched from the early 70s, with thick pork chop sideburns, black-rimmed bottle-cap glasses. He looked at me for an uncomfortable 20 seconds before grabbing the clipboard and calling out my name, as if the place was packed with patients. I reluctantly followed him into the examination room, thinking how US healthcare is truly fucked no matter which side you're on. The examination room was dated. There were instruments I'd never seen before, which must have been legit back in the day. It was like going into a medical time capsule, throwing us back a few decades. I saw a body chart on the wall and read the small print at the bottom. Printed in 1971. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked enthusiastically, getting started with my examination. Maybe he doesn't get many patients, I thought. I explained my earache and dizzy spells, and he used a host of outdated instruments to look up my nose and ears. Once he finished, he looked me over for another awkward 20 or so seconds before speaking again. "Are you familiar with bees?" The question came completely out of nowhere. Without even waiting for my answer, or caring if I was remotely interested, he launched into a story about the current death of bees. Rather, his theory of why we are seeing bees die at such an alarming rate. All of our wireless networking, be it cellular, Wi-Fi, or Bluetooth, are disrupting their state of mind, as he put it, driving them insane and killing them. "There's no telling what may be happening to us," he added, as he began jotting things down on his clipboard. I thought he was writing me a prescription for antibiotics or something, but he was jotting down some kind of elaborate math equation. He enthusiastically scribbled for another few awkward seconds before telling me my problem wasn't an ear infection, but a brain blockage, and that I needed neural cleaning. It's at this moment when I thought I should just get up and leave. This guy was obviously a quack, but there was something very convincing about him, especially when he asked how I was feeling at that moment, which was much better than when I walked in. In fact, I felt great. "You're in a clean room," he said, free of any of those invisible network streams penetrating the airwaves. He then instructed me to look at my cell phone. To my surprise, I had no service, and my earbuds wouldn't connect to Bluetooth. I asked him what gives. He opened a nearby drawer and showed me a smooth and black $half sized coin. A mixture of elements and minerals compounded into a single coin for extracting foreign entities, or something to that effect. A CPAP for the brain, he concluded. He gave me a square clear plastic box with one of them inside, and advised me to use it at night while sleeping. I was to come back in for a checkup once the color starts to change. I paid the $80 fee, took the coin, and went home, feeling cheated out of $80. That night, however, I had the most wonderful dream. And it didn't stop there. Night after night, it was nothing but the brightest, most whimsical bliss one could imagine. I'd wake up each morning with an intense feeling of clarity. I got to the point where I couldn't wait to go to sleep and see what kind of adventure I'd have next. And it was all because of this strange coin I kept inside my drawer. About a week later, I woke up and my cell phone was ringing next to me. I was getting a signal. I noticed the coin had faded into a light gray color. My head throbbed, and I could barely open my eyes against the sunlight. Each beat of my heart radiated pain through my temples. I could barely function. It was time for my checkup. I returned to the urgent care once I regained a little more composure. When I entered, there were 2 nurses waiting for me. How they knew I'd be coming in was anyone's guess. I recognized that odd red and white geometric shape from the picture in the waiting room, embroidered on their sleeves. They quickly took me into an examination room, one that was much different than before. It was up to date, with modern instruments and furnishings. They laid me on the table and began a thorough examination, asking me how I felt, where it hurt, and when the coin had begun to fade. I laid back thinking, and I couldn't remember. I also couldn't remember how I even got to the urgent care. Did I drive? Take the bus? Did I even own a car? As I pondered this, the 2 nurses were busy getting me prepped. Somewhere in the process, anesthesia was administered, and my world became foggy. It was only when the doctor walked in that I realized I was laying on an operating table. "How's my worker bee feeling today?" he asked, in the most polite voice. I tried to answer him, but my words just wouldn't form. My motor skills were completely gone. The only thing I sensed was a small pressure on my shoulders, like a stiffness from sleeping on the pillow wrong. I could hear the doctor converse with one of the nurses, but I had no idea what they were saying. At times, things became so bright I couldn't see. Then my sight would come back, only with the colors inverted. I'm not certain, but there was a moment when I thought I could see deeper into things, like see the exact makeup of materials in the walls, or the liquids inside tubes connected to my IVs. It was when the second nurse entered the room that I was able to glimpse myself on the table. She had a silver tray under her arm, and in its blurry reflection, could see that the doctor was wrist deep inside the back of my head. You would think that panic would set in when witnessing a man literally digging into one's brain. However, I was calm and content. I just lay there, accepting whatever was taking place, perhaps it was the threshold of the oddly dark-colored anesthesia pumping into my veins. Or maybe it was the doctor somehow controlling my emotions, as he did whatever it was he was doing to me. Those were the last thoughts I remember having before I found myself sitting in the waiting room again. I had suddenly lost track of time. I thought about this while staring at the picture of the red and white geometric shape, experiencing flashes of an operation that may or may not have happened. "Don't be afraid," a fragile female voice whispered from nearby. I looked over, and to my surprise, another person sat a seat away from me. She looked at me as if she knew who I was, in a close and special kind of way. And she did look familiar, especially her short, pixie-like strawberry blonde hair. I'd seen her before. "We're doing this together," she added, with a concerned yet prepared look in her eyes. The same geometric shape was embroidered on her sleeve. Before I could ask what we were doing, the door opened and the doctor came out. He grabbed the clipboard and called out my name. I sat in the dated examination room, trying to make sense of these strange events. This was all familiar, but new at the same time. "Disc?" he asked me plainly, as if this was some sort of routine. For a split second, I had no idea what he was asking. Then I remembered. I dug into my pocket and gave him the coin, once again faded into a light gray color. He took it and placed it under a large magnifying glass. He looked at it closely for a few moments. "Some good stuff here," he said excitedly, as he scanned through the strange encrypted data that started printing out of a machine, like a receipt from a cash register. Things started to vaguely resemble each other. The doctor began my examination, looking up in my ears and up my nose with outdated instruments. When he finished, he leaned back and asked if I was familiar with bees. Everything came rushing back at breakneck speed. More flashes of me on the operating table shot across my mind. I felt a sick unease fester deep inside my stomach. This wasn't right. This place wasn't right. Yet, nonetheless, I felt like I belonged here. "Yes," I recall saying to him. He smiled and gave me a small, clear, and square box with a new black coin inside. That was the last thing I remember before finding myself sitting on my couch at home. I didn't recall how I got there. I think it was the woman from the waiting room. She was frantically pacing around my apartment, throwing stuff in a backpack. "They have you," she kept repeating. She was pleading with me to leave with her. My mind was too preoccupied with piecing together recent events to fully pay attention. Why couldn't I remember the details? How many times had I been to the urgent care? And for how long? I asked her. "Your whole life," she answered. I finally recognized her as one of the nurses, and something more, like she has always been in my life. And she has. "You're my attachment," she explained. A standard-issued worker bee, bred to provide an existence for the preserved. She was there at my birth, just as she is here now, ensuring I'd grow up to be a strong young man with a healthy brain. but she was setting me free. From what? I asked. She took my hand. Her explanation came swift and with an intense feeling of remorse. My whole life has been harvested so someone else can enjoy theirs. All these wonderful adventures I have in my dreams, all of my emotions, thoughts, drained into the black coin. In reality, my life has been nothing more but trips to the urgent care since birth. And soon the work will be done, and I'll cease to exist. She's been waking me up to get me out before it's too late. I don't know why. She apologized over and over, saying she had no choice. I was born into this. It's the sole reason why I was conceived, for the good of the symbols. What symbols? I asked. She held up a plastic security card. The red and white geometric shape was situated under a barcode. I've known that image longer than I realized. Maybe she was telling me the truth. I followed her out of my apartment and into a car loaded with supplies. This was it. A great escape. We drove out of town and onto the busy highway. It suddenly occurred to me that I've never seen anything past city limits. I sat back, experiencing a strange sensation of freedom before falling asleep. I woke up to my cell phone ringing on the nightstand next to my bed. What another amazing adventure. But my head is splitting again. Makes sense though. My coin is faded to a dark gray, and I'm getting cell service. I'm thinking it's time for another checkup. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you want to see more, let me know in the comments below, and tell me what you thought of this narration. Make sure to follow me on Twitter for updates, and if you'd like to get early videos, shoutouts, and much more, I'd appreciate it if you check out my Patreon page. It's a place where you can help support my channel while getting awesome rewards in the process, and every pledge helps out a ton, no matter the size. So if you'd like to see all the rewards I offer and consider becoming a patron, it'd mean a ton to me if you'd click the link in the description and just check it out. And don't forget to show some love to the amazingly talented authors who make these narrations possible. Have a good night, everybody. Cheers.